Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Executive Scrutiny Board on 9th of June 2025. I'm Councillor Matthew Holmes. I represent Mickleover Ward, and the first thing I'd like to do is have everyone introduce themselves, so you don't have to do it again later in the meeting. So if I can start with Matthew at the back there, and we'll go to Lucy and so on and so forth.
Yep, I'm Councillor Matthew Eyre, and I represent the Oakwood Ward.
I'm Lucy Kerr, and I'm one of the elected members from Littleover Ward, and I'm a Liberal Democrat.
Good evening, I'm Martin Rawson, representing Chaddiston West Ward.
Saqib Amin, Councillor for Blakeries Ward.
Sue Bonser, Councillor for Abbey Ward.
Gulfraz Nawaz, Councillor for Arboretum Ward.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Sarah Bolton, one of the Labour councillors for Blakeries Ward. Thank you.
Thank you all. We do have apologies from Councillor Wright and Councillor Lindsay. So I'll move on to item 2, which is late items. Alex, I think you have got a small update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, there are no late items for this meeting or for the Council Cabinet agenda. However, I understand that there were some typographical errors corrected in 2 of the Cabinet reports. So the latest versions of those reports for item 8 and item 13 are available on the Democracy Portal, but for those councillors who printed out their papers earlier in the week, we will, I think the presenting officers will draw your attention to those changes when those items are presented.
Thank you, Alex. Item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of May. Sorry, item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any? No? So it is item 4, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of May 2025, which is attached. Are there any issues? Councillor Bolton. Oh, sorry, yeah. There isn't any. Okay. At this point, just before we move on, I think it's taken as read, and I've been a long-time member of the Exec Scrutiny Board, along with a few other councillors. There are often a few new faces. But of course, let's show respect for one another, and of course for officers who are here to present reports and answer our questions. And a couple of things on that. I'm very open for officers who may be presenting reports at the tail end of our Exec Scrutiny meetings to ask myself or via the scrutiny lead if the order can be rearranged to take an item, because it's not the best use of your time if you have to wait for an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, if you're presenting just one item. So, especially if it's a routine one. So please do that for future meetings, and we'll see what we can do to rearrange things to do that for you. And also, as I've said, officers attend to present the reports and answer our queries or questions raised by the board, members of the chair or the board itself. And on high-profile reports and those of significant interest, officers have to adhere to impartiality, of course, in responding, and at times that can be a challenge and can lead to frustration for board members who may not sometimes be able to receive the answer or opinion or detail that they're actually looking for. Now, officers do their best to obviously take back queries, and they do update us accordingly. And one of those ideas that I'm looking at with Alex and other officers is potentially asking Cabinet members to, not all the time, but where there's significant issues, significant reports, whether we could have Cabinet members with officers at future meetings. I think that would actually be a positive thing, and we would approach it as a positive, working together for the best interests of the city approach. So let's see if we can do that. I think that would be something that would be positive. Also, I think there is work that we can do to bring the wider ONS boards and scrutiny together. So also I think it would be very positive to have potentially some meetings where Overview and Scrutiny can work with the other board chairs, myself, to see how we can positively engage with the administration and the work of the council. So that's another area, I think, of work which I'd like to pursue as well. And also, we regularly agree recommendations to send to Cabinet. Now, recently we found that, and I've done this myself, where we would verbalise a recommendation and then it would be noted by the lead council officer. What I'd like to do now is have two ways of doing that. One would be actually write it on the forms, which you should see on the benches there, or you can compile an email or a Teams message, in this case to Alex, for that recommendation. If you need a little bit of time, it's not a problem, we can go back to it. But definitely want it to be in written form, actual physical written form, or electronic communications to the officer for recommendations when they're agreed, if they're agreed. And I think that's it. So, okay. Moving on to item 5, forward plan, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you're aware, the Executive Scrutiny Board routinely considered the most recent version of the Council's forward plan. The forward plan provides the necessary statutory notice period of key decisions that the Council Cabinet intend to make. And as I think, as we've discussed prior to this meeting, Chair, we're looking to use the forward plan as a tool for identifying those items where we might want to request that the Council Cabinet member attend the scrutiny meeting. So we may not necessarily have the correct officers in the room for each of the individual items on the forward plan, but the opportunity to take any questions from the board and identify those items for further scrutiny.
Thank you. Does anyone have any issue? Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah Bolton, Blakery's ward. Members will recall a few meetings ago when we unanimously agreed to amend this document, and I think it was Craig who was with us for that particular meeting, and I raised it again at the following one, that on this report, where appropriate, it should put the wards where whatever we're discussing, it should put the wards affected. Now, this arose because of the calling at Groveby and Oregon Way, Ellendon Road in Chaddesden. That's where this issue arose, because we all knew there was a mix-up there and a lack of consultation with councillors. So following that, we agreed to put the wards on where appropriate. I appreciate not all this document can say the wards, but where practical, we asked for the ward or the wards to be put on. Secondly, we also asked, under the comment where it says who will be consulted, councillors should be added, where we are missed on occasions. And I used, sorry, the pages numbers have gone from the bottom of my paper document. I think it's 7. It's under the Place Directorate, where the heading is repayment options for leaseholders on major works charges. And then what is the decision to be taken? And you'll see the last sentence says major works undertaken on blocks of flats. Well, where are these blocks of flats? And then further down in the summary, it says the council currently has 660 leaseholders. Well, where are they? Which wards? We could be councillors for those leaseholders, but we aren't down as a consultee. I think it's useful that councillors should be made aware. And then if you turn the page, I think it's page 10, the first item, Chair, is the decision is extension / renewal of public space protection orders. To extend and review public space protection orders that will prohibit antisocial behaviour activity in the city centre. Now, from my reckoning, that could involve Abbey Ward, Arboretum Ward, Darley Ward, the city centre. Forgive me, I don't know the boundaries exactly. So it would be useful to know which wards, and also councillors aren't listed again on here as a consultee. Now, my point is regarding this, and I think this is a really important issue, when you bear in mind the recent fatality we had in the St Peter's area, that has caused a lot of unrest in that part of the city, Chair. And I can see the reasoning behind this, but I think we ought to be told a little bit more about it. And it's important for the councillors in the 3 wards I've highlighted, and there could actually be another ward. And I think those councillors ought to be involved regarding the extension and renewal of public space protection orders. You know, I really think this document needs to be updated, as we said, because it hasn't, has it? This must be 3 meetings ago now, where we've asked for this to be done, and it hasn't. And I thought Craig, who was here with us that evening, said he was going to take it back and discuss it. And as far as I'm concerned, there's been no changes.
Alex, would you like to cover that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a project ongoing at the moment, and we're working with our IT colleagues to redesign the way that full plan items are submitted from across different services within the council, that can then be taken and automatically used to produce a new forward plan document. Can confirm in the versions of that document that I've seen, the question of which wards are affected is in that document. So we expect to see that come forward in the next sort of month or so. So I would hope that, if not by the time of the next meeting, certainly by the meeting after that, you should see a new format for the forward plan. We also work with colleagues to ensure that forward plan entries are as comprehensive as possible. Granted, not all information is known at the time that these entries are sometimes filled out, but our advice to colleagues is that as much information as possible is provided when a forward plan entry is completed. Councillor Kerr first, then Nawaz.
Yeah, on that same theme, Chair, which I think it's good to hear that we are getting a review, because it has stayed static, I think, for a very long time. I think one of the things that's is missing for me is a quick statement that says why this is a key decision. And I think that helps officers to clarify in their own minds whether it's because it's 2 wards, in which case it should state the 2 or more wards it affects, or whether it's it's because it's more financial or whatever. It's a policy decision. The other angle on here that I think could be included is, or in terms of process, is if a scrutiny committee is taking up a particular theme, at that point, members who are going to be affected, such as having a leasehold property in that area, should be invited and told that it's going to be discussed at the scrutiny committee, so that they could participate, tune in or whatever if necessary.
Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to, what Councillor Walton have said, that, you know, the city centre, more than half is in our ward, Arboretum ward. We don't know nothing, the councillors don't know anything about it. It'd be good to mention Arboretum ward in there, and if we can find, you know, as a councillors, we can find out about this more. It'll be good. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any value, without complicating the process, to have a little bit of exec scrutiny members' interaction with the document, the live document, before we see it in a public agenda?
Yeah, happy to share it.
It's just that it may catch some of the things that we need to see, rather than then coming to another meeting and then there'll be a delay. And so if you could do that, use us as guinea pigs, if you like, to actually see it from councillors' eyes, yeah, no and then the cohort can obviously nudge things in the right direction. Okay? Right, so item 6 then is the council cabinet agenda, and from the routine things, which we'll skip through. Item 4, which is identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply. Well, in my role, one of the first things that I've done is I was approached and asked to agree an exemption of call-in to item 8 on the agenda, which I agreed to. Does anyone have any questions of that, or are we going to actually deal with that in closed session? As always, I approached it very much the way I would if I was actually asking for the exemption. seems sensible to me, and I understand the reasons behind that, and I think whilst I won't agree to them all, I'm sure in the future this one was fine by me, so I did that. Item 5 will be routine for them. Minutes again, yes. Recommendations, obviously, if there's any tonight. So we'll move on to key decisions. So item 8, this is Ben White.
Thank you, Chair. Ben White, Head of Estates and Property Review. So given the sensitive nature of this transaction, we were required to enter into and sign a non-disclosure agreement. And as such, all aspects of this transaction must remain confidential. Details of the transaction are included in the confidential report at item 13, and obviously happy to discuss those at that point. But in essence, approval is sought to dispose of land and associated buildings in Spondon Ward. A Cabinet member and ward councillors have been made aware of this proposed sale, and the recommendation is to declare the land as surplus as identified in the confidential report, as I say, at item 13, and agree to its disposal on the terms set out in that report. Those reasons being that the site is not required by the council for current or future operational use, and additionally, the council does not have a specific strategy for investment into property solely for investment purposes. Alongside this, the investment market for properties and land of this type remain very strong at present, and the council's external property advisors, along with Estate Service, consider this an opportune time to sell and receive a substantial capital receipt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or queries on item 8? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on then to item 9, which is send an alternative provision. Sharon, I believe that you're introducing this one for us.
Hello, Chair. Sorry about the delay there. Yes, absolutely. So this is one of the many papers that are falling out of an original paper that came out to Cabinet on August 2024. Its focus at this occasion is to seek permission from Cabinet to release funding to support the works, the renovation works that need to be undertaken at Friargate Studio in order to ensure that we can deliver our new SEND Skills Hub Post-16 programme. So we're requesting that 0.28 million our funding is to be released from the SEND High Needs Provision Capital Fund. The details are in paragraph 4 or section 4 of the report. The reasons are very much relating to our ability to meet the needs of our children and young people for 16 to 25-year-olds. And the focus of this work is really to look to see how we can bring together all of the different elements that support young people to become active, visible members of their community. So within that, there's an intent to have a student centre for careers advice, benefits advice, somewhere that parents and carers can come and meet and discuss with staff any of the issues that they're facing or would like to see for their youngsters post-16. But it's also about how we can bring together different parts of the provider networks that are delivering to young people, particularly in terms of supported internships and supported employment opportunities. Being located within the Friargate Studio building enables us to be both right at the heart of the student quarter, but also at the same time being a multi-sectoral centre where we've got businesses live working from the building. It really does engender the concept that young people should be active within the employment, within employment, and really gives them an opportunity to explore what it would be like to not be in a special school or in a school environment, but one that is coexisting with businesses from Derby. So it's a requirement, a recommendation for us to commence the scheme development and the renovation work that needs to be undertaken at Friargate Studio.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, queries or points to raise? Councillor Kerr.
I think this is very timely. I think it's going to be hard work over the summer to achieve this for September. And clearly, if it's bringing those services together, I think it'll be an easier service, easier access for people from across the city to reach than Whittaker Road. In terms of the report, there's quite a lot of acronyms which aren't defined, which would have been helpful. Some of them I knew, some of them I don't, but if that can be addressed as a future pointer, I think it'd be helpful for people. And just as a comment, and I also quite often comment on the climate impact statement, I very much appreciate, due to their nature, it's not always possible to recycle such materials. But what's, from my point of view, missing from here is that there's going to be quite a lot of materials and services procured to do this work, and they will have embodied carbon, and people are going to have to travel to get there. So there's a missing, probably, red bit there, which could have been thought through a little bit more. But I think we're still on a learning curve about those. Is there, in terms of the transition of some people into these services, are the young people up to speed about where they're going to be going in the autumn, and to make it easier for anybody who is moving from one place to the other to be able to do that transition? And it might be timely, it may not be yourself who can answer this one, but there's reference to a horticultural project based in Whittaker Road. I don't know if that's going to be continuing, and Elveston Castle. And I wondered whether there was scope for horticultural work to be done alongside our own horticultural staff, and if not, why not? Because that would be a really nice way of working positively as corporate parents elsewhere within the business, within the council.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Yes, accept the point on acronyms, my apologies, and we'll make sure that we either attach glossaries or be more specific in papers going forward. Again, on the climate change, yes, we do need to have a closer look at how we're responding to climate change, and we'll take action to make sure we do so in subsequent reports, and apologies for that. In terms of the youngsters, the young people who are moving into the centre, yes, for Transition 2, it's been really clear to young people who are on the Transition 2 programme about where they will be sited, and there's already been transition work undertaken with some of those young people to help them start the process of being able to access somewhere centrally as Friarsgate Studios. And what we do have is a drop-off point within the car park to make sure that those who are coming by taxi or other means can do so there, and then supported to independently travel from there afterwards wherever possible. And the same is so for those from Horizons St Martin's. So everybody knows who is starting in September where they will be based. One of the things that we'll be doing over the next academic year is holding a number of events there. So parents' evenings, really want the Parent Carer Forum to engage more, so it'll be space for parents to use as well. But open evenings, careers events, opening up the whole world of opportunities of post-16, but also within our supporting internships and employment offer. And we are really, really well serviced by our employers who are on board with us and want to walk alongside us within this. And we will also have a specific employer event to build on that work that we've already started. So yes, we expect that to be more achievable and as we grow. And we do have a substantial amount of the floor space in order to enable us to grow within that space. Have I answered all your questions? Horticulture, that's right, yes. So horticulture is based at the moment, Friarsgate Studio, Whittaker Road. Whilst it was located out of Whittaker Road, the actual delivery was at Elveston Castle, and we are able to use the part of the walled garden there. Our intent is to also bring some of that into Friarsgate Studios, having a living wall, looking at how we can use the outside space at Friargate Studios to expand some horticultural work. And ideally, we'd like to go into the market hall to start to support young people to sell the things that they grow, whether that be plants or others. Yes, another part of that will be to see how we work alongside our parks teams and other services to ensure that we might be able to win contracts to deliver the programmes of work, but also to develop supported internships and supported employment opportunities. So yes, that's the ambition going forward. I like the ambition. I hope so too.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think any improvement to send and the alternative provision is to be welcomed, because as I'm sure we all know from casework, you know, there are a lot of our constituents who are, you know, quite concerned about the young people not being in education or getting the education they deserve. I'm just looking at this provision on the location. The outdoor space seems to be limited, and I can see chaos at parking. It's a very, very busy traffic light situation there. I mean, there is a car park, but knowing how it operates in, I'm sure, all of our wards, I can see chaos at drop-off and pick-up. Should there have been a planning application for change of use here? I couldn't see it in the report whether it's been applied for and agreed, because this is going to be an education establishment, isn't it, presumably? So have they had to apply for planning permission?
It's part use, Councillor. So it will be part education provision, part business provision. Yes, we do have to apply for planning permission, and planning is going through, but we expect that to, and that should have been included in the report. My apologies for it not being so. We'll make sure that that's pointed out on for Cabinet when we meet. In terms of transport, the drop-off and pick-up points, the intent of this is to increase the independence of young people and not reliance upon any taxis or minibus provision. There are some young people who will not be able to access this provision, which is why we've got the Whittaker Road post-16 provision under St Andrews. We also have Broomfield with Derby College. So for the for particularly in terms of outdoor opportunities, there is plenty of opportunity for young people to be accessing that provision there too. When we're talking about parents' evenings or open evenings for children, young people and their families, we will be looking for those who are attending the event to use the car parking facilities that already exist within the city. But on a day-to-day basis, we do not expect significant amounts of traffic flow.
Okay. We don't really want to turn it into a planning meeting, but I take your point, and I think the office has been clear that it'll be going through the right processes. Highways officers will making their deliberations. And who knows, Councillor Bolton, me and you may be deciding upon it in the next few weeks. Who knows? Are there any other questions at all? Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Really just to welcome this report, really. It's good to see the use of or the reuse of an existing building. The cost, I think, is 280k to deliver this project's really pretty good value when you consider the cost of a new build or something like that. So I think it's been an innovative use of some of our existing building stock to deliver something that's very worthwhile, such as this. So, I guess the question is is there any other funding that's required to make the project happen, or is everything contained in this report? Is my only question really. And again, just to say it's positive to see this moving towards a more inclusive approach for SEND and helping those young people to be able to learn the life skills. Having the contact with those employers and businesses within the centre, I think, will be a real plus in terms of helping them transition into the adult world.
Just before you, could we just clarify the question you have?
Yes, sorry, it was a bit rambling. So yeah, just to ask if there's any additional funding required, or is the 280k in the report the full amount for the project?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. The allocation that we identified in the August 2024 paper was up to 500,000 for this particular piece of work and the works that we need to be enabled in order to fully deliver everything that we want. At the moment is 280,000. However, there is still 220,000 remaining in the budget or on the budget line that we might need to call on in future months or years in order to expand provision.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, looking at the report and the reasons as well, it's 32% roughly is independent out of authority specialist and other LA's placement. I mean, it's a significant amount of money, especially when we look at the average cost of placement of around £65,000 per child. So, I mean, what I'd like to do as chair is actually send a recommendation to Cabinet to welcome the report and welcome the provision that it will provide. So I think that would be a positive thing. Councillor Wilson, would you like to second that? Yeah, if we could do that. Welcome the report and the provision it's going to provide. I've just broken my own rule. But you okay, Alex, for that one? I think that's fairly straightforward.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that item? We can move on. Okay. Okay, so we move on to item 10, which is compliance with contract and financial procedure matters. Tony, I believe that you're going to be introducing this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report deals with 4 main items, and I'd like to take the first 2 items together, if that's all right. The first is acceptance of MHCLG Homelessness Prevention Grant of 2.328 million. This grant has been provided to the Council to ensure local authorities can focus on preventing homelessness, as well as funding the provision of temporary accommodation, and continue to embed the changes required through the implementation of the Homelessness Reduction Act. Local authorities are expected to use it to embed the Homelessness Reduction Act and contribute to ending rough sleeping, reduce the numbers of families in temporary accommodation, and reduce the use of bed and breakfast accommodation for families. Item 2 is acceptance of MHCLG Rough Sleeping Prevention and Recovery Grant of 1.166 million. And again, local authorities are expected to use this to deliver priorities for services that are designed for the needs across homelessness and rough sleeping, including targeting the people at the highest risk of repeat homelessness, deliver a high-quality service that is accessible to all, and ensuring homelessness and rough sleeping are brief, delivering a reduction in long stays in temporary accommodation. And Derby Homes will be delivering these services on behalf of the Council. I'll stop there for any questions, and we've got colleagues from Derby Homes with us tonight.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. The situation for people coming out of institutions, I think, is really challenging. I'm not an expert in the process, but I'm presuming that a lot of those people will be leaving and applying for universal credit at the same time. and universal credit is given in arrears, which I think is probably one reason why people end up homeless, because they have insufficient funds to be able to survive until over that first period without any money. And I just wondered whether, when people are coming out of a government institution such as a prison, whether this is the case, or whether the government has actually put in place some sort of safeguard to enable those people not to immediately fall out of a safety net. And if not, whether it's something, Chair, maybe we ought to be suggesting that we should be raising as an issue, because we have several prisons near here from whom people may be coming.
I can take that question away, unless you're able to.
No, we'll provide a process. We'll provide you an update on how we...
Just repeat that if you can, sorry.
Thanks, Owen. I was just saying, if I'll get you an update on the process, particularly with those leaving prison, because we do work with prison services. But if I provide that, hopefully that'll show you the process.
Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, any grants are welcome for the city, but especially 3.5 million from our present government. But if you look at page 41 under 411, it actually details how this is going to work. I was wondering if we can have a bit more meat on the bone as to how, and will we be able to cope, or have we got the necessary places? Because the last I heard, all our B&Bs were full, you know, and there are so many families in adequate temporary accommodation. How is all this going to be handled? Because we know the figures are really, really high on these issues, and I'm just wondering how Derby Homes are going to manage it.
Okay, fair point. Do we have any comment on that?
So we are going to continue to do what we've been doing. So this is a continuation of a grant. So that supports a range of different services that we're providing. So it's not a new piece of work, it's a continuation of that which we're already doing.
Any other points? Or should we have the officer move on to the next items? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item, item 3, is acceptance of revenue funding of £975,000 over 3 financial years from the Heritage Lottery Fund for the Nature Town and Cities Strategic Initiative. This funding aims to support local authorities, their partners and communities with capacity and resources to put public green and blue spaces at the heart of their strategic thinking. The focus of the Derby application is on revitalising and expanding access to green spaces, using nature-based solutions and regeneration to create more resilience, improve quality of life and promote environmental sustainability, connecting people, wildlife and nature. The funding is to place access to nature and nature recovery at the heart of local placemaking, co-create with communities and partners ambitious green space strategies, and create strong and diverse partnerships with local communities and businesses, and develop implementation plans that will transform the way public green spaces are utilised. And again, we have an officer here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I open it up to members, I think this one is really important to engage with ward members, councillors who are embedded in their communities, who are involved in lots of community projects, community organisations. I know that myself and my colleagues in Mickleover Ward, and I'm sure it's shared with my other colleagues here, would be very interested in working with you on this, ensuring that it isn't just city-centric, if you like. It needs to be, in my view, embedded in the communities, which is the whole of the city. I'm sure that's the intention. But yeah, what I would like to see is it just be within the council sort of officers deciding where the investment, where the work occurs. Really do reach out via the neighbourhood board process, and we can actively engage with you and ensure that this would be a huge success. You'll find that there's you're pushing at an open door if you do that. Certainly in my ward, and I know others will be the same. So yeah, if I can ask for that, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Eyre.
I'll move over to this one, Chair. I don't think the microphone's working on that one. Yeah, absolutely endorse and agree with everything you've just said there, especially the element of pushing at an open door, and that I think every council would want to be involved in this sort of thing. We've heard, obviously, in that an overview of the sort of the things that projects would have to meet in order to be considered under this. I just wondered whether there are any sort of specific things. So it talks about things like community gardens and that sort of thing. Are there any specific things that we're thinking of for this funding to be allocated to?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So I suppose it's a range of different things, really. More than anything, it's about developing capacity. So actually looking at what do we currently have in place in terms of a good understanding around our green spaces and blue spaces across the entire city, the value of those in terms of the ecology and also the well-being benefits that can be experienced by people that live within those areas, whether they use them or not. And in addition, what will also help to drive where some of this investment takes place is the Derbyshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy and the actions that fall out of that. So actually we can then start to look at where nature and people can play a really, really important role. So a big part of that is engaging significantly with our communities, through ward members, but also our communities, to one, understand those green spaces and how they are managed and maintained, and actually the role that communities could play in terms of supporting that process, working alongside the council to do so, and thinking about what are the investments or the resources required to do that, number one. But then also to look at what are some of the transformational pieces of work that could help us support that. So that's the development of a green infrastructure strategy for the city, so we can start to identify where there are areas that may play a greater role in connecting nature, wildlife, etc. And then there's another strand that we are wanting to, or we are looking at putting into the submission, and if it's successful, and that's around understanding the role that AI can play within that and helping us support how we might manage and maintain some of our spaces, the value that might create in terms of ecology. Because that will also help us understand where we can be more efficient with our resources and our operational models of how we manage and maintain spaces as a council, but also with our city as well.
Fabulous, thank you. And if I'm okay to come back in on that one, Chair. Entirely agree and support what was said there. And if I can just make a bit of a shameless plug, I suppose, in a sense, that obviously, Owen, we had a fantastic meeting when you came over to Oakwood, and we discussed a lot about the idea of community orchards. I'd just really like to put that forward and make sure that's the sort of thing that is on the agenda for things like this. I think environmentally, they're brilliant. I think in terms of community, they're brilliant. I think in terms of resilience, you know, I don't know anyone that hasn't gone into a shop recently and looked at the price of fruit compared to the price of things that are far less good for us, and noticed there's a bit of an offset, and as the fruit price is going up, other prices aren't. It's become far more expensive for people. And that idea of a community orchard where people can go and there's free fruit available for people, something I really, really support. And I'm more than happy to volunteer Oakwood Ward forward if it were to come to it, and if there was that opportunity to do so, to be part of this. And I think if that's something that can be considered going forward for mine and for all wards, I'd very much appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, duly noted, and yeah, really welcome that from yourself and our ward councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I bring Councillor Kerr in, Owen, you made a good point there, and actually, there is an opportunity here, I think, that in not every case, but in some cases where a project is set up in a community, the ownership of that, maybe the land, obviously, would retain with the council, but actually the maintenance, the ongoing work, can actually be taken up by the community group, friends of group, or whatever it might be. So actually, it's a double win, really, because it can actually save the council money, because then effectively the community is going to be looking after that particular area of space. So obviously not always the case, but it's certainly an opportunity. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. And you've touched on what's I think is really important in here, in that this is a 3-year programme, and if it's going to continue to benefit Derby, it's got to be something that is ongoing and sustainable. So those thoughts about how it can be real people from real communities who get embedded in this, the partnerships that are mentioned here at the moment are all a bit corporate. rather than community-based. The Friends of, you know, you mentioned neighbourhood boards, but Friends of Parks aren't mentioned, Trees for Derby aren't mentioned, allotments aren't mentioned. They could all be part of the thinking on here, which gets you down to a real grassroots level. But just before that, Chair, or possibly not just before that, I think we need to be mindful of the recommendation here, because it's a dual recommendation, both to bid and, if it's successful, receive. And I don't know, it's more of a strategic thinking that would we as Scrutiny like to see it coming back to Cabinet to say we've now received this money and we're going to, we've been offered this money and we're going to receive it, or whether we think it all should be in the same paper, because otherwise we might miss when it actually comes back in again, because it may not be a public announcement to say we've now got it and the project's going forward. That could be delayed. I've mentioned the communities, I've mentioned the 3 years, but I want to bring in two other things, one of which is quite a lot of our open spaces are actually highway. And I think we must make sure that we include our highway, which has spaces for trees, it has spaces for some meadows, wildflower meadows, it has spaces for other opportunities, and they need to be part of this, very much part of this greening. We also have schools which have space, and we need to have those as partnerships as well. We know Derby doesn't have enough trees, and you need to find space before you can put a tree in quite often. And from the item already raised in this meeting, we see the opportunity for training. I have people in Littleover Ward who are frustrated because they feel they can't go and trim the bottom growth from a tree, which they can't see past because it's blocking. And I can understand that we don't want a free-for-all of people going and chopping our highway trees. But I think, Chair, it'd be really nice if we could have a series of upskillings, which aren't quite an MVQ, but they could be given some sort of award within the city, so that this is how to trim the wild branches on the trees. This is when you're allowed to, this is how the safeguards you should do when you're picking up litter. This is how you should be nurturing a young tree that's just been planted. And they could be fairly basic things which could empower people to do a very simple course, come away with a simple certificate and feel that they are now part of a citywide team to make Derby a greener place. And if we could include the wherewithal for setting up those sorts of schemes as part of this initial 3 years, it could stand us in good stead for taking that forward into the future.
Thank you. Councillor, was there an outstanding question that you needed answering in that one?
Chair, there wasn't a specific question in there, except that we don't have enough mention, as you pointed out, Chair, of actual community, people level engagement. And I was trying to give some examples of those, which I hope can be included in the bid that goes forward. Whether we want to say something to Cabinet about that, I don't think is necessary, unless you do, Chair.
I think there is actually an opportunity. You mentioned about it being brought back or us being given an update, and I think that would probably be, if you're willing to propose a recommendation that maybe an update report is brought back to scrutiny in due course. To us, yes.
Do you want it to come to here or to come to Cabinet?
Exec scrutiny. Yeah, if you could propose that.
Chair, I'll write some words and.
Okay, we'll come back to it. I mean, it's a significant amount of money, but obviously, if you divided that through the wards, I think it's roughly about £50,000, and obviously that's quite significant. But obviously, with the cost of things as well, we have to be mindful that you know, there's only a finite amount of money. But I hope you've taken on board our comments. Councillor Kerr is going to ask for us to agree that an update is brought back to the Scrutiny Board in due course, so that we can keep track of this, and we'll get a seconder for that shortly. Is there any other queries on this item at all? There's no rush, Councillor Kerr. We can come back to that as well, so let me know when you're ready. Okay, so do we have one other item? Yes, early settlement.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the final item is early settlement of a Derbyshire County Cricket Club loan. Cabinet approval is sought to accept the early settlement of the loan, which will improve the council's cash flow position. In August 2015, Cabinet approval was given to award a loan to Derbyshire Cricket Club. DCC have approached the Council to request early repayment of the loan. Early settlement is allowed under the terms of the existing agreement. Once approval has been given from Cabinet, delegated approval is requested for the Section 151 officer in consultation with the Strategic Director of Communities and Place and the Cabinet member for City Centre to finalise the details of the early settlement once the final terms have been agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any queries or questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, it's just really to say this. It's quite pleasing to see that the cricket club's now in a position to repay the loan. I can remember at the time when 2015, I think it was talk of the cricket club looking at other alternatives around the county and moving out of Derby, which was one of the reasons why the loan was provided. So yeah, it's good to see they're obviously in a firmer financial position now that they're able to make this repayment, and that cricket in Derbyshire is going from strength to strength. Went to see beat Kent the other week, and of course we had international women's cricket here as well the other week as well. So all the positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rawson. We share those. Congratulations to the club, and long may it may continue. Very important, along with our football club as well. Very important for the city, and it's good to see. Are there any other questions or queries? So, Councillor Kerr, do you have a recommendation for the funding for the Nature Town and City Strategic Initiative?
I do. I was just sending it to you, but it hadn't got through the 2-minute delay. To ask that Cabinet, I think it should be Cabinet rather than officers, report back to Exec Scrutiny an update as soon as the outcome of the bid is known.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Eyre, no problem. I'll make sure that if you send it to me, I will Teams it to Alex. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Item 11, 2024-25 Q4 performance monitoring. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sarah Walker. I'm the Head of Strategy, Performance and Partnerships. I'm here to present the 2024-25 Q4 performance monitoring. This is part of our standard performance monitoring framework to Cabinet, and it's the last one of the last financial year. It covers the period from January to March of 2025. However, many of the measures that we report on at this point in the year represent the full year outturn from April 2024. So they obviously provide the overall achievements as at the end of the year. As is always the case, the report covers our priority performance measures and objectives that were agreed as part of the 24-25 Council Delivery Plan, our priority projects and our latest strategic risks from our strategic risk register. So set out within paragraph 4.6 is a summary of outturns in relation to performance as at the end of the year for our performance measures. So there were 61 measures that had an update available alongside an approved target. The percentage that have achieved has actually declined slightly as part of our quality assurance process for the annual report. So it's now 57.1% rather than 59% within your report, which is again a slight dip from the position reported last year where it was 65%. However, we have 82 measures within the Council Delivery Plan last year that had a comparable direction of travel, and 63% of these had improved compared to 55% that had improved last year. So actually, in terms of delivering improvements for the city, where we have got comparable information available, we are seeing year-on-year improvements in a number of different areas. So set out within paragraph 4.5 of the report is a number of key achievements in line with the priority themes in our council plan of green growth, vibrant, resilient and working smarter. And I'd like to just pick out a few. Not all of those are contained within 4.5, most of which are contained within Appendix 1, but I think demonstrate some of the achievements that have been delivered over the last year for the city through the work of obviously many individuals across the organisation. So the first one is in relation to the additional funding that was secured for our City, Our River, which is presented in paragraph 4.5. So this is a significant amount of funding that's coming back into the city in a really important, obviously, programme of activity, and we've seen the benefits of earlier phases of that programme over recent years. In relation to the theme of growth, we've seen an increase in the number of dwellings and shared houses improved to meet decent home standards. So this has increased to 291, which I think is over target and an improvement on the previous year, which is a really important part of the programme of work that we have to ensure that people are living in appropriate environments that promotes their health and well-being. In terms of growth, we've also seen a significant amount of work for supporting businesses and jobs created and safeguarded. So in relation to the number of jobs created or safeguarded, we had 340 reported this year against a target of 200. And there were 761 businesses supported this year against a target of 217 and a position of 98 last year. So in terms of supporting that overall growth within the city, I think they're really important things to highlight. A priority that we've had for a number of years as a council is in relation to the recruitment of foster carers, and we achieved a position of 127 foster carers at the end of the year, which was above the position reported last year, which was 112, and over our target of 120. And really importantly, this is one of the mechanisms that we're using to support the stability of placements for our looked after children. And both of those measures, in terms of the length of placements and the number of moves that young people experience, have seen improvements over this year, which again is supporting us to deliver really positive outcomes for that cohort. Supporting independence for some people who may be at risk of falls. We've seen an increase in those numbers of individuals participating in falls prevention work. So this was up at 966 participants, which was a rise from 738 last year and above the target of 550. So again, this is, I think, really evidence of the impact that we're working to deliver for the city. I've only got two more. Attendances at Derby Live events have exceeded 120,000. So in terms of providing that opportunity for engagement in cultural activity, that's increased on last year and has exceeded the target. And finally, from a working smarter perspective, whilst not both measures have achieved their target, one of them is reported as green and one as amber, our collection rates in terms of council tax and business rates have both improved compared to where we were in the previous year. So I think the report obviously contains a lot more examples of things that we've delivered alongside emerging risks, and I'll come on to talk about those. But I think that they were just a couple of highlights that I picked up where actually we've seen a significant improvement or a significant change aspect of delivery in areas that are really impactful for the city over the last financial year. So supporting the achievements of our improved direction of travel and our targets, we set a number of objectives within the council delivery plan each year, and at the end of March, 91% of these were either completed or were on track. And whilst the number will have changed from the previous year, it was 93% the previous year. So comparably, delivery remains consistent. We've got no objectives that reported any major slippage, and we had 4 where some slippage was reported, and these are set out in paragraph 4.7 of the covering report. There are a number of areas of focus and, in some instances, development or threats from a performance perspective. These are picked out within paragraph 4.8 of the report, and these are areas that I think we have flagged in previous quarters. And certainly at the end of quarter 3, there were 3 areas that were recommended for further work. And this has happened in all areas. So that was in relation to the timeliness of our education, health and care plans. It was in relation to the total number, average number of working days lost due to sickness absence, and in relation to the number of children placed at a distance who are looked after. And there's a summary of activity that's happened within that paragraph in the report. Moving on from performance delivery to our priority projects, 84% of these were assessed as either green or amber green, which is comparable to the position reported at the end of December. There are more details on those 3 areas that have changed in paragraph 4.9 of the report, 2 of which have improved, and 1 project has seen a decline in the overall RAG rating as at the end of Q4. We have 18 strategic risks in our strategic risk register. So pleasingly, we've seen 2 threat level scores reduce from Q3 to Q4. We have, however, seen 1 threat level increase, and this is in relation to our contract management. It remains a medium level risk, so it hasn't increased to becoming a high threat for the organisation. However, the likelihood of this risk occurring has increased due to capacity limitations, which we see a lot across our risks at all levels. We recognise the challenges that many public sector organisations are facing, and there's been 1 new risk added to the strategic risk register. This is both as a threat risk and an opportunity risk in relation to local government reorganisation. There is a full overview of performance presented against all of our measures, objectives, projects and risks within Appendix 1. And the only other thing to note is when the Council Delivery Plan was presented for approval, I think it was in May, for 25-26, we said that we would present back the proposed set of performance measures and supporting targets that we'll use as the basis of our monitoring framework for the next year, and these are presented in Appendix 2. These will be subject to review at the mid-year point and alongside the Council Delivery Plan for 25-26. If there are any proposed changes, they will be fed through to Executive Scrutiny and subsequently Cabinet as part of our monitoring framework that happens every 3 months. I'm happy to take any questions and answer them if I can, or take them away to lead officers to answer for colleagues.
Thank you for that. I'll open this up then. Are there any questions on any of the items? Councillor Kerr.
And there are a mixture of questions, some of which will be very easy and some of which may need to be taken away. The Ascend project, I don't know what it is. Does anybody know what it is? Ascend.
In terms of I think that's in growth, and that's in relation to shared prosperity funding. It was in relation to businesses, yes. So supporting businesses. There was also money spent for the cultural sector as well. So it was business startup.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Why do we talk about people up to the age of 64 when retirement is now beyond 64?
Because that is the definition against which we are asked to monitor performance in relation to these measures. So we have to work to the criteria which is set nationally. Okay, that's a fair answer. The Butterfly project, which has disappeared and become on hold, we've been highlighted to us that deprived communities in which this exists are short of green open space. We've been talking about the importance of green open space. I don't know what's happening to that project, but if there isn't another, I just feel it should be wound up and it should be turned into public open space. And I wonder, Chair, whether this might be an opportunity for us to suggest that to the Cabinet as a way of resolving that problem. In terms of falls prevention, I'm a real supporter of the work that's going on there, and well done to, I think it's Move More or whoever is organising that. And I hope we've got the capacity to further increase that, because I think it's really important. But alongside that, people will continue to fall, and I know that particularly women are often given calcium and vitamin D tablets, so that if they do fall, they're less likely to have a serious break. And I wonder if we're incorporating something along those lines into that generation, and whether there's messaging along for that as well. Because I want to prevent falls, but if people do fall, we want to minimise the threat, and I don't know whether that's something that we're doing. The news on recycling is definitely not as good. And I think that both the recycling and the level of contamination, and we're accepting a 20% almost level of contamination, it just shows the size of the education that we need to be doing on there. So if we're going to do a deep dive, is that an area that we could do a deep dive in, please? The handyman, we've got a solution for the handyman. We're going to employ somebody else. But there will be quite a lot of people who've been waiting for months for what might be a small project. And I feel there ought to be an alternative to that, so that we're encouraging those who can afford to pay what may only be 20 quid for somebody to come and do something quite simple.
are actually moved forward so that they don't remain inconvenienced for that length of time. I don't know quite what the solution is. And there's a specific question here on page 16 where we've got ASC 01F, the proportion of adults in contact with secondary mental health services in paid employment. We're saying blue is 14%. 14% of the target, blue is above that. And I can see this both ways, because if large numbers of people who are in full-time employment are feeling under pressure and therefore seeking help from mental health, it's bad news. But it's actually good news that they are getting help because they've recognised it. And I feel there needs to be a bit more nuance, if you like, as to what is good and why it's good, rather than assuming it's good.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take some of those questions. So thank you for some of those reflections. The Butterfly project, obviously housing project, so that would have to be a recommendation that was made to Cabinet or taken back through lead officers within that area. In terms of falls prevention, I would have to speak to our public health colleagues around what further advice is given alongside not just the participation in that, but also following any falls that do happen. I agree on the recycling rates. However, what I would say is within this area, we've done a lot of work to bring more timely information to colleagues as well. So we were previously reporting a quarter in arrears. So what you are getting is provisional information. So it may be that those figures increase, but that obviously comes, the provisional nature brings with it the caveat that it is subject to more change. So that may answer some of the questions around why performance is not in line with where it has been historically. Having said that, it remains part of our monitoring framework going forward. And once we get into more historical outturns reporting in line with where we are currently, I think that will give a better baseline for challenge. And in relation to the handy person service, obviously I can recommend that through to the lead officer within that area. In relation to that particular measure on page 16, that's a national measure that we report as part of our adult social care outcomes framework. So generally there are guidelines around what is specifically included. So I think it's a much more targeted measure than perhaps what the definition would indicate in terms of the cohort of individuals that would fit the eligibility criteria for that measure. Having said that, what I'm really keen that we get to with all of our targets and all of our performance monitoring is a level of maturity that reflects the nuances that are required. When we set some targets, they're absolutely set in some areas as a threshold. So we know within our framework and within Appendix 2, there will be somewhere we say, we're setting this as a threshold, which might be an indication to an emerging risk or vice versa, an emerging opportunity, which is why I think focusing on the direction of travel, the impact that's being delivered through the objectives and how we're evidencing this with our performance measures is where we need to be shifting our conversation, and the targets can provide a tool against which we can pick areas up to focus on, but I think we need to ensure we've got that holistic view. But specifically within relation to that one, it is a positive that we're supporting that particular cohort into employment.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Eyre, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Bonser.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sarah, as always, for the report and the very comprehensive nature of it all. It's one question, but it's in two parts. The first part, I think, is for you. The second part might be. So it's around priority projects for community-managed libraries. Obviously, that project has gone from green to amber, red, I think then to red, and then to off a cliff, and now isn't happening in the way that it was written in here. When was the decision made to allocate that project as amber red, so to downgrade it from green? And the second part, which I'm not sure would be for you, is now that that project has undergone such a change in the way it's being looked at being delivered, do we know what the next steps will be in terms of anything coming to exec scrutiny and then coming to Cabinet?
Okay, so I can certainly answer the first part of the question. So the report is as at the end of March, so that would have been the rating that was assessed when the position was reported at the end of March. I know the position within relation to this project has changed, so I would anticipate that the lead officers will be bringing an update through to Cabinet and therefore scrutiny in due course. I'm happy to take that away and ask for timings on that, but that certainly isn't something that I would be in a position to answer.
Fabulous, thank you. I did think that second one might not be for you, but if you could take that away and come back, that'd be fantastic.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Page 71 of the report, it mentions the knoll, which is Stenson Road, Village Street in Blakery's ward. The summary appraisal mentions that there has been a delay on site due to the discovery of a Victorian well under the planned foundations of one of the plots. I wasn't told about this, and neither was my fellow councillor here, Councillor Amin. So can the Blakery's ward councillors have an update? Because clearly it's going to be a delay on site now, and I don't expect Sarah to know. I think it's Michael Gilly who's updating us. But until I read this report, I didn't even know there was a delay on site. And also the following page, page 72, the second item, Warwick House, which again is in Blakery's ward. It does say the handover remains on track for September. I assume that's this year and not next year, but it doesn't say. If I could just have updates on both of those, please. And then page 78, the first indicate the total number of social worker vacancies within CYP. It's very vague. It just says vacancies have been consistent throughout the year and are in line with the 24-25 year end position. Well, what are the vacancies and how are they affecting the existing social workers who obviously have got a caseload? And as I know from previous experience, if that caseload is overloaded, then clearly the children are not getting the service they require. So I think I would like a fuller explanation on that, please, because it is not something that I think is a good situation to be in. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bolton. So if we can have liaison with the Blakery's ward councillors on the well, clarification on September what year, and then obviously the vacancies in social workers.
Thank you, Chair. I will certainly take away the first 2 points and ask for a briefing from our housing colleagues in relation to that. In relation to the social care vacancies, I take the point in relation to the commentary. What I can report is that at the time of reporting, there were no agency workers within early help and children's social care, and caseloads were stable across many of the services and teams. But I can ensure that a further update is provided from lead officers if further information is required.
Thank you. Did we work out whether it was September this year or next year?
I believe it's September this year, but I won't officially commit to that as I'm not the owner of that project.
Assume it is. If that's not correct, obviously, if you can update Councillor Bolton accordingly, that'd be good. Councillor Bonser.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a quick question on the risk element that you've highlighted, in particular the days lost due to sickness. I certainly know from work on the Personnel Committee that the sort of top 3 reasons for absence being MSK stress and post-op sort of absence. And I'm just wondering whether the targets and benchmarks are realistic, bearing in mind there's still this huge backlog that is being worked through, and whether the post-op element of that sickness figure is something that's sort of skewing our work in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really insightful reflection in relation to that. So it's an area that we consider quite regularly. So we've done a lot of work over the last, I say reporting period, it's actually extended beyond the end of March as part of a deep dive review of sickness absence. We have been seeking to gain more insight in terms of comparably where we sit relative to our peers, and we've been using the insight to really challenge ourselves against the target. And I think this goes back to the point that I'd made previous about targets driving the right behaviours but also being set at an appropriate level so that they show aspiration, they act as a tolerance. So the target proposed for 25-26, I think, and I'm going to say this without double checking, but I'll check as I'm saying it, is 11 days. So we have worked really hard to do that. What I would say is we do a mid-year review of the targets, and I think that we need to be really insight-led as to how achievable that target is. If we get to, we know there's a seasonality element of obviously our sickness absence trends, but if we get to the end of potentially Q1, I think we need to be starting to reflect on whether or not that remains an achievable target, and if not, what would be something that would be acceptable in terms of showing our ambition to support that reduced total number of working days lost due to sickness, whilst considering that there may be a certain percentage of that cohort that we know will be off for a period, so that we're really using the insight to drive the right targets.
Thank you. Okay. Any other queries, comments? I've got a few myself. Okay, just on, it's been touched on, CSO 103, SP PM11. The rollout of the food waste collections is going to be, it doesn't bode well, does it, for that? It's going to be a challenge, I think, to engage with residents, to embrace it. I remember, I can't remember when it was, Councillor Kerr may be able to help me with the date, but I remember that we were the #1, if not in the top 5 consistently for a few years of recycling city. Urban areas. Yeah, urban areas. Since then it's been, it's not been going exactly the way we wanted it to. We've peaked and we're kind of like going down the data. I'm not sure where we sit nationally or even in comparable local authorities, so that'd be probably something to be interested to see that kind of information. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is, how are we going to reinvigorate the residents of the city to engage, to be part of this effort, really? Because the direction of travel is not positive, and we're going to need to do something to change that. So do we have an action plan? Do we have, just give us some opportunity to at least be positive about where this is headed?
Yeah, so whilst performance has dipped slightly, what I would say is it has been, I think it was 40%, I'm going to again say it off the top of my head, I think we'd exceeded 40% last year. In terms of that education, that will be part of the programme of work that's happening, and that will be introduced as a priority area within the reporting objectives for 25-26. So that will give that opportunity to review and reflect on the balance between what activity is happening and what impact is that happening, recognising there obviously timing is key within that. So yes, my understanding is there's education work that's ongoing. There's a supporting action plan as part of that wider programme of activity, and that will be reported on from Q1 onwards. We are working to add benchmarking information into our performance and risk system, which I recognise we still need to do some more work with councillors in terms of training of that. We've only introduced it over the last 6 months, but that will ensure that we are reporting on all of those comparable information where we've got it within our reports, so that the insight, again, leads to the right conversations and generates the appropriate challenge.
Thank you. I think the city's, not everybody, but I think generally we seem to have slipped into we do recycle, but we don't know why we recycle to a certain degree. And I think there's probably a reset needed there to actually have a big PR drive as to what the benefits are and why we're asking, the council is asking residents to separate the waste. And probably the food waste collections is going to give that opportunity, not just to define why that is going to, well, the residents are going to be asked to do that, but also reinvigorate why they're blue waste, brown waste, etc. So, yeah, I mean, let's see how that goes. The other area is SR4 41, CP21, which is delivering our climate change action plan. Now, am I right in reading here that we have an action plan, is approved by Cabinet in 2024. There's 35 identified strategic actions, but we only have one dedicated officer to help drive that forward. Now, that shouldn't really be a hindrance, because I think it's been said many times that every department, every council, member of the council is responsible for helping to deliver this, etc., etc. It probably isn't our job necessarily to dive too much into this, but I would like to be sure that this area is actually going to be scrutinised by the ONS. And can we ensure, is that the plan? Because if not, I would like to recommend that it is sent to the relevant ONS. Scrutiny of and the delivery of the action plan.
So in terms of the detail that sits within the delivery of the action plan, obviously we will only present an overall high-level position as part of the quarterly monitoring. What I would say is that that action plan is on the performance and risk system, and we are monitoring it through that route also. But I think that, again, gives you a good opportunity to make that recommendation. But we are supporting that process through monitoring it in PARS.
Okay, we're just checking which particular OS. Okay, right. Okay, so Councillor Ingle is chair of Regen. So it's the climate change, transportation, sustainability. Sorry. No, that's not it. Bear with me. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, the Regeneration, Vibrancy, Climate Change Scrutiny Board. There we go. Regeneration Board, we'll shorten it. So, yeah, I would definitely like to recommend that that particular item is sent to the Regen Board for scrutiny. I'll get that wording off to Alex. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Eyre. I think it's really important that they take a closer look at that. And finally, the one that, just a clarification really, number of disabled facilities grant adaptions completed. Is this within homes? As in, would it be new build or would it be retrospective builds? Just a little bit of detail on that, please.
Without looking at the definition form, I believe it will be within people's homes to support people to remain at home. I can, however, double check the definition of that measure to get clarity, but I don't think it would necessarily incorporate the adaptations as part of new builds. So I think it will be within established homes or properties.
Okay, and it's highlighting the fact that there's no money, effectively.
There is a grant that we are using as effectively as we can to support those adaptations and support people to remain safe and independent within their homes. But obviously, the grant has restrictions, as does all funding.
I mean, can Derby Homes, for example, look to actually provide new builds or adaptions in that way? Obviously, that means that people wouldn't necessarily be staying in the same property if it could be done a different way. But I know, for example, the council, it was a few years ago when I was a cabinet member, where we bought a plot at Hackwood Farm in Mickleover for adapted properties, and that was a really huge success. Obviously not in every new build, you know, we can't do it in every new build, but that is another avenue. I mean, how does that fit in with this, or is it a completely separate pot of money, capital money, for example?
We do have pathways through from adults and children's into Derby Homes for specific properties or developments. In terms of broader opportunities for adaptations, that would obviously have to be raised with the service leads, but we do already have established pathways in, and there is already a programme of activity that's happening in relation to specific areas of need.
Thank you. Are there any other queries, points that the board would like to make? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Just bear with me 1 second. I will write the recommendation, Alex, and I'll make sure it's sent to you shortly. I'm beginning to regret that now, but we'll get there. Do you want to pass the resolution? Yes. Okay, item 12 then. Oh.
I'll be okay. That's good. I don't have to read it out. It's legal jargon, but it's exclusion of press and public.